Bracken Darrell, welcome to the Executive Talk.
Thank you for having me.
I've been wanting you for a long time already because
wow, I never heard that.
if you look at every ranking of the best, the most successful CEO in Switzerland, you're always amongst the top 3. So I guess in this show we talk a lot about what it takes to be a good executive. I guess you know all the secrets about it, right?
I definitely. I'm not sure what it takes to be a great executive, but I've been a CEO now for 6 years. And I had the huge benefit of learning under another great CEO, or a great CEO, Garino De Luca, who was a prior guest of yours, our former CEO. He's now our chairman.
So you've been doing it for 5, almost 6 years now, and as I said, highly successfully, has to be said. When I read about your principles, about your values, about how you lead the company, it always boils down to one sentence, and it is clean the floor and wash the window. What is it with that sentence? Maybe you can elaborate a little bit.
Yeah, I mean that's a piece of advice I got from a very successful Israeli entrepreneur I met about 8 or 10 years ago. And the week before I started at Logitech, I went to see him and I asked for advice, and he gave me some. And then I got up from the table. As I was walking away, he said, "Oh, one more thing. You clean the floors, and you clean the windows and wash the floors." And I walked away and I thought about what he meant, and I thought, at first I don't think I knew what he meant, but then I realized what he meant was own the details, really feel like an owner, and I completely believe in that, and I try to act like that every day.
Is it a part of the kind of, yes, own the details, but I read something else in there as well, that you have to be on an eye level with all the employees, and that's something that a lot of people say about you. You're a very hands-on guy. You're a very kind of approachable guy. I don't think you have an own office anymore, so it's all kind of communal space. People can talk to you. You actually empower and encourage people to tell you what's wrong. Is that kind of the kind of leadership principle you have as well?
Yeah, and I think that principle of the CEO is no different from any other employee, just has a different set of responsibilities, has always been true in Logitech. If you go back to Daniel Darrell, who was one of the founders of the company, when he ran the company, I think that's the way he felt. And everybody always felt comfortable coming to Daniel Darrell and saying what they thought, and often things that were painful for him. And the same thing was true of Garino De Luca. People would come to him, and he would stand outside in the smokers area, smoking cigarettes with the people from accounts receivable, and he learned in there how good the business was, because if we're shipping a lot and the accounts receivable had too much free time, that wasn't a good thing, or weren't shipping enough. And I really believe in that everybody's job is just a different job within the company, but by staying in touch with everybody, as many people as you can, you really know what's happening inside your business. And so I'm a huge believer in that.
Of course, on paper, this is quite easy. And, you can say that, you can tell me everything you want. In reality, I can imagine it's a tricky thing. And that's what a lot of executives say. I live in this bubble and I don't have people around me who can actually, who dare tell me the truth. How difficult is that to kind of encourage people to, even if it's a harsh truth, or even if it might offend you, to really tell you what's happened?
I think it's one of the hardest things in being a leader. Because no matter how much you think you're sending the right signals, you're also sending mixed signals, because nobody likes to be told they're wrong. Nobody likes to be told their idea isn't good enough or good. And if you have a direct report or somebody else who works in the company, they want to come tell you things you want to hear. And so it's one of the single hardest things I think all leaders have. And I think, so what do you do about that? One is you have to ask. So when I meet people, especially as I get outside of where I am most of the time, when I go to Germany and see Yalchin, or I go to see Neil in the UK, or I see Charlotte when we're talking about music, I always start with, tell me what's not working. Tell me what I should be worried about. Tell me what's broken. Because if I don't start with that, I'll usually get a good dose of what's really going well. And that's just not very helpful.
Is it true that you still talk to every single person that's hired by Logitech, and that afterwards, after 30 or 60 or whatever days, you go back to them and tell them what their impression is of the company?
You know all my secrets. Did you
so
talk
it
to
is
these
true
guys?
then.
Yeah. So I don't get to every single employee now, because I don't get to everybody in Asia, just from a timing standpoint. Eventually I probably do. But I do meet with every single employee who's hired in the company, and in either a small group or a larger group, or I certainly try to. And the last question I ask them, usually talk about the strategy and the culture, But the last thing I always say to them is, now do me a favor. You have something that I've lost forever, which is you have the advantage of being unbiased and new, and I can't get it anymore. So you will notice things that I can't. And so you might notice that this carpet is really terrible and it makes me feel depressed and you should change it. Or you might say, why in the world aren't you in healthcare? It seems like you have all the capabilities. What I want you to do is in the first 60 to 90 days, write me a note of those things that you notice. Could be one thing, could be 20, of those things that if you were me, you would do. Mm-hmm. And I get those notes now every few days I get one, and it's amazing how often I just immediately say, okay, we're going to start doing this. And because they're great ideas.
So you want thinkers and owners in their own field as well?
Owners. Everybody's a thinker, but not everybody's an owner. I want everybody to be an owner.
Another thing that you read a lot about you in interviews is that you're, as I said, a very personal, very approachable person, but that seems to be kind of your character trait as well, that you're almost haven't lost your humbleness, so to speak. So you don't, and you said it yourself, you're not someone special just because you're the CEO. And you famously said in an interview as well, you can pretty much judge someone or his character by how he behaves in a restaurant, for example, if he treats well a waiter as well. Is that something you always try to keep as well, that kind of, I'm one of you attitude in a way?
Yeah, the truth is that, I lived for 4 years in Lugano, mm-hmm. in Switzerland, and in some ways I never felt more at home than with the Swiss, because Switzerland's this interesting combination of humility, but capability. And I really admired that. And when I see it in other people, I'm always kind of blown away when I see somebody who sort of operates on both ends of that spectrum. They're super humble, but super capable. And so I don't think I light up either end of that well enough, but I admire it in others. And so if some people think I'm like that, I'm really proud of that. I don't think I exercise it well enough, but humility is an incredibly important thing in good leadership.
Funny when you hear talking about these two cultures. That was one of the reasons, by the way, why the board of Logitech thought that you were the right match for the company as well. That you come from the American culture, of course, but you've lived in Switzerland for 4 years, so you know the kind of Swiss and European way as well. Did that help you in your job? That you have those two? Now you live in the States and you just come to Switzerland on a regular basis, but to know a little bit how both worlds work and tick.
Yeah, I think it was crucial. I also lived in Germany for 4 years before that. So I had this, and I've traveled all over the world a lot since I was in my 20s. So I had this advantage of really being the American who didn't think that America did everything right, and understands how flawed everybody is, but America especially. And so I really had a feel for that. I also had a feel for the diversity of cultures in Europe and throughout the world. And I'm no expert at it, but it's part of who I am. So that was certainly important. I think the second thing that was really important for my ability to step into the Logitech role was my experience running Braun. Mm-hmm. Braun, the shavers and epilators, that business, because that was a German business, super global, very engineering centric with great design. Mm-hmm.
Something that interests you a lot.
Design
and the
Absolutely a lot. I think if you took those attributes and said, okay, how do you compare them with Logitech's? The similarities overwhelm the differences. And so I think as a result, when I walked into Logitech for the first day and weeks and months, I felt right at home because I felt like I'm in a great engineering company that has great design potential. And it's a very global company.
You say it yourself. It's a global company. We, as Swiss, tend to, be proud of it and of its Swiss roots, of course. But is there still a lot of Switzerland in Logitech? If you look at it, I mean, the staff is international. You have offices in the Silicon Valley. You're very much kind of global. What's the Swiss thing about it?
Yeah, it's a fascinating company in that regard. I think the Swissness will never leave Logitech, and including the humility of the company. Our headquarters is in Lausanne, but we have a very large office in Silicon Valley. We have large offices in Asia. So we almost feel tripolar, where it's very difficult to really feel. Everywhere you go, you feel the pull of the local area. Whether if I'm in Shanghai, I feel like our team is really embedded in the Chinese culture. But underneath all that, there is this strong sense of capability and humility, of always learning, of needing to win in the premium space, of feeling small. Even some people don't think we're small, but we do. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a little bit like Switzerland. So, well, I mean, if I look at Switzerland from the outside, I don't think it's small at all. But the truth is, everybody in Switzerland feels like, well, we're small. We've got to really do things extremely well to be successful. That's exactly what it feels like in almost every part of Logitech.
There's one claim, one motto, almost a mantra that you repeat all the time. It's you'd rather be a big fish in a small pond than the opposite. So you don't really want to compete with the big tech companies, for example. That sounds very Swiss, because the American you might say, yes, I want to be the next Apple, to be the next the next big thing out there.
Yeah, I couldn't feel any more strongly about that. I have so much admiration for Apple and Amazon and Google and Microsoft, and I could go on. The really large mega giants of the tech world. I have a lot of respect for them, and they build these amazing platforms that we all enjoy every day. Our job is to deliver experience that's personal, that's sometimes magical, and we do it really well. That enables a platform that someone else has created. So we play in this world that sits between the mega giant platforms that are sitting in the cloud and the personal experience that you have with those. And in most cases, we can create a better experience, and that's really what we're after. So yeah, we try to be the big fish in those experiences right around you, which are small ponds, rather than play in the ocean of the cloud.
But doesn't the small pond get too small at one time? Because you also say, we never stop. We have to go on and never be content with what you have. And the worst thing is just to be still and be happy with what you've got. You are quite driven as well. So maybe you are driving towards the bigger sea, no?
Well, I think the way to think about it for us is, yes, do we have the potential to be a very large company over time? Yes, we do. As large as one of those mega companies? Maybe,
But still in a smaller pond.
But we'll be a series of smaller ponds. Yeah. So just like Unilever or Nestle is in a series of categories that are, relatively small relative to some of those, to the car industry or something, we'll be in a series of smaller categories trying to be the leader in each one of those. So we won't be the big phone company. We'll be in a lot of smaller categories that are enabling cloud services.
You're doing extremely well. I mean, it's not a coincidence that since the day you started, I mean, things have changed quite a bit. I think you quadrupled the profits, and the share price went up drastically as well. Is that just you, or where do you see the kind of secret of success of the company in the last 5 to 6 years?
The whole magic of performance, of doing well, is people. And I'm not the first person to say that, and I won't be the last. And I have an amazing team, and I've had an amazing team from the beginning. When I walked in the doors of Logitech the first week, I was kind of startled by how strong the talent was there. And then over time, we've brought other people in from the outside as things changed, and we have just an amazing team. Whether it's my head of corporate communications or my CFO or my head of design, or just an all-star team of people, and then all the way down to the front line, we have really strong talent, and that is the key. I am just another person in that overall chain, and I play my role. But we've got so many great role players in the company.
How crucial was the plan and the idea, and you implemented it as well, to kind of change the business model as well? Because 10 years ago we would have talked about PCs and the mouse, the famous product. Now it changed completely. You went into other areas and do accessories that weren't even thought of 10 years ago. To have that courage and say, okay, something is not quite right, let's change things around. Was that a hard thing to do, or was it even simpler because things weren't doing so well?
You said it. I mean, I think, in the beginning it was really easy because I walked in, the business was in trouble, and people were looking at me for the answer, like the oracle, and of course I wasn't. And so it was easy to make the early changes because I could just say, we're going to go over there, and people went over there because they knew what we were doing wasn't working. Over time, as we proceed to being more and more successful, people are just as cooperative and eager to go, but it's not always easy to make changes because things are working. And so sometimes you need to change the things that are working drastically. I'll add one story. After my 5th year here, and my team now knows the story, in January of one night I woke up, before I went to bed, I thought, I don't know if I'm the right person to run this company for the next 5 years. So we've had a great run, but But what would the person look like? And I went through and
So
really
you
thought
had
about
self-doubts in the middle of success.
I did well, because of the success, and so I really thought, should we get somebody else to do this? And I went through and sketched how it would be, and I thought, well, you know what, the next CEO would probably look a lot like me, would have some differences, but would also be risky to hire one. So I thought, what do I do? Do I stay? Do I go? So I decided to fire myself. So I fired myself that night, and I went to bed. I thought, I'll decide what to do in the morning. I woke up the next morning, and I thought, okay.
I'm rehiring myself.
I did, and I decided to rehire myself on one condition: no sacred cows.
Yeah.
Nothing that I've done, no person, no strategy, no project, no seed, is sacred. And so I immediately started making some changes, and I feel like a newcomer again. I felt like that ever since. I mean, now I'm a year into that, and I feel just as enthusiastic as ever.
This is incredible. For me, it shows that you think a lot about your role, also that your position in the company. Is it true that you kind of define your own goals as well on a yearly basis? That you even have an Excel sheet where you kind of where you
Well, you do know a lot.
You grade yourself
Yeah.
from a year-to-year basis. Is that true? Or
Now,
is it?
now I'm horrified that you know all of my nasty details. Yeah, starting when I was about 20, in my 20s, I would take 8 areas of my life, my work, my health, my kids, my marriage, my finances, everything, and I would set goals, set long-term goals, then short, intermediate goals, and then start measuring things, have actions, and this is going to sound terrifying. Usually at this point, people's eyes start to glaze over, and they think, what kind of weirdo is this? And then at the end of the year, I would score all that. Never got better than a 66%, by the way. And then I would write my goals for the next year. So I did that every year for years and years and years. And I found out later that my CFO did the same thing after he came to work for me, or for us. But yeah, I did do that. Now I'm a little less detailed about that aspect of it, but I still do something like that every year.
And how do you fare on a yearly basis? Are you getting better?
No, actually, my goals get higher and my performance stays about the same.
But that shows you're ambitious as with yourself.
very
I mean, you have to achieve goals.
Yeah, I'm very ambitious for impact. I think I really believe that all of us have this incredible untapped potential that will never get all the way out there. So, I always say, the one thing, everybody should have goals, because goals are free, and they're the most powerful thing you can have, because a goal makes you, if you believe in it, makes you align yourself to go try to accomplish it. So it's the most powerful thing you can have. And people without goals, I feel sorry for them, because they're missing this incredible ingredient. It's more important than capability, because you can build capability once you understand what your goal is.
Having said that, I know, and you talked a lot about it as well, that part of that drive, of that ambition, comes from early on. You had a modest upbringing in Western Kentucky, USA, single mother, 3 siblings, I think. Yeah. You didn't have a lot of money, and you now say, that is probably the best thing that could have happened to me and to my character, because early on you had to have that goal, and you had to be driven in a way.
Yeah. I was very lucky, in retrospect, that I grew up with I wasn't the poorest person in the world, but I grew up in a very modest background, because I had to work, and I didn't really have an option. It was kind of sink or swim. You're either going to do it on your own, or it's not going to happen. So I was very, very lucky in that regard, and I think about that all the time. And it's one of the reasons why I sort of think, I've gotten to the point now where I almost think you always need to start from a clean slate, almost start from ground zero. If you could figure out how to walk into every day as if you started over again at zero, that's the way I think at Logitech. If we could start every day as if, everything we created is gone, and now we have to create. Now we have to sell. And in a way, that's what we are, because Logitech sells a device every day. We've sold 2 billion mice over our history, but tomorrow, we'll start with zero.
It's a white page.
We'll have nothing. So we have to innovate, and we have to outperform anybody else who wants to buy a mouse from us. We have to be, or wants to sell a mouse to somebody we want to sell to. We have to create a better mouse and get that communicated to them, and get that in the right place for them to buy it, and make sure it's the right cost, or we lose the sale. So it's one of the things I love about this business is we can't rest. We have to fight. It's a constant war, which I love, because you are kind of starting at ground zero every time.
But if you look back at that journey that you did, and if you think back of that small kid in Western Kentucky, not having a lot of money, literally having to wait for that one pair of jeans getting out of the tumbler to be able to wear it to school every day, and the person you are now, with with all due respect, more than 7 million Swiss francs a year. That's a complete different world. Did you change within that?
I was talking to Patrick Abishir, who's on our board, who's the former president of EPFL,
Yeah.
and he was talking about how much we change over time chemically. Kind of the cell by cell. Are we the same person when we're our age that we were when we were that kid? And we were just talking about that, and it made me think. Are we? And I thought, and I've thought a lot about that. I had that conversation with him about a month ago. I thought a lot about that. I thought, I feel the same. Yeah. I still play basketball 4 times a week, 3 or 4 times a week. I still know I can do better. I still don't have a good enough jump shot, and I feel the same. I really feel the same. I think most of your viewers will say the same thing. And somewhere inside them, still that little kid that was 10 years old, had all the same insecurities and the same strengths. And I think that's the one thing you'll never lose. The one thing.
Does money change you? Are you more content now that I don't have to struggle that much anymore?
I've never been very money oriented. It'll probably be hard for people to believe, but I've never been very money oriented. I don't really need a car. I don't need a house. I do have a house. I do have a car. I'm much more driven by impact and making a difference in things and people. So I don't think it's changed me. It'd probably be a better question for people who know me best, but because in some ways maybe you don't see yourself for what you are. But I don't think it's changed me.
Speaking of the future of Logitech as well, you once said, I can see myself in this company for the next 15 years. You seem to be very happy at where you are. Do you honestly think that this might be my last job I ever have?
No, there's no chance this will be my last job because they'll force me out at some point because I'll be too old, and then I'll go do something else.
And maybe you'll fire yourself again.
Well, maybe, but I will never retire. Yeah. So now, will I do this for a long, long time? I hope so. I love it. I love it. I think we have so much potential. We have such a great team. There's an unlimited number of things we can do. This is a platform that, for those of us who work in this company, is magical. We have so many things we can do. I love the Swiss humility of the company, but the incredible capability. I always say we're a harmless, capable partner for the players who really are driving the world, but we're quite capable, and we have a lot of things we can do. So I don't see any reason to stop. And
in that regard, I think you can measure it by what you invent or what you produce, but you're such a kind of futuristic or future-driven company, and in a field where new technology will show up sooner or later. I think that's a good place to be in as well, to know that that in a way the future plays for us or plays in our favor as well.
I couldn't agree more. I think if you really think about it, one of the things I love about being part of Logitech, which sits in the middle of this amazing tech world, is that if you think about it, 10 years ago, if I made the statement I'm going to make now, you'd roll your eyes, but you'd say, huh? Computing power, which is really a microprocessor. Okay, think about the computer on your desk. It's really a microprocessor. It's free. It's almost free. At a per-use basis now, it's almost free because it's sitting in the cloud and thousands of people are using it at the same time or using a piece of it. Sensors are very low cost because the phone you have is now loaded with sensors, and that's driven the cost of sensors down. And storage is really free. Why am I telling you that? Because those 3 things that we associate with the computer on your desk or now maybe with your phone in your pocket are now available at almost no cost to anything, including the couch you're sitting on, the light that's behind us, the table in front of us, the water glass. So all these things were invented before those 3 things were relatively free or relatively low cost anyway. So everything can be reinvented if you're in the right place at the right time. You get to be part of that. So we're a company that has the potential to really go into almost anything. And almost anything can be reinvented now. Sometimes it'll be reinvented by the incumbent. Sometimes it won't. And so sometimes it's going to be us in one of our existing categories. Sometimes we're going to go into a new one. But there are just so many opportunities.
So brave new world indeed. Final question. We started with your values and being an executive and what is important to you. We heard one rule that clean the floor and wash the window would be maybe one advice that you could give. If I ask you for one key advice that you have for other executives or people thinking about that role, what would that be? What would you tell them? What's the most important thing?
Yeah, I would say I apologize. It's going to be more than one. First thing is you're not an executive. You work in a company like everybody else. you're not an executive. You work in the company like everybody else. If you start there, that's a good place to start. The second one is you stay hungry. No matter how much success you have, no matter what happens to you, you be hungry every single day. If you just do those two things, you're off to a good start.
Bracken Darrell, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.